Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefühl and welcome to a very sunny Hamburg. We're here today to take a look at the brand new Mercedes Vito and Sprinter. Brand new, you say? Yes, because now they're all electric. If you've ever had any reason, either as a business or an individual, to need to have a panel van or a light goods vehicle, you will for sure recognize both of these silhouettes. They are more than a little bit common on the roads all around Europe. Here we have the very well-used Sprinter and of course the lighter, smaller, ubiquitous Vito. So what's the big deal? Well, they are now available as electric models. You can say, well, yeah, but we're familiar and aware of that concept. Well, you might be, but not quite like this. Mercedes have been working very hard in order to be able to deliver an experience for the customer whereby the only choice you need to make is what drivetrain you want to go with. They claim that these vehicles have the same payload and the same available space for loading things in the back as any of their other drivetrains. We are here today to find out if that could possibly be true and what the driving experience is like. I'm very excited. I'm a big fan of vans. I hope you are too. Let's find out some more. So I'm not going to waste a huge amount of time talking about the exterior design of these vehicles. They are very, very popular, and I'm sure you are more than a little bit aware already. What I do want to show you, however, is that they are living up to their promise to start with as being exactly the same as the vehicles you know and love. It's been a lot of years in development, but we now have a very nice finish on the front here. Why do I like this so much? Well, the most common place for commercial vehicles to take a knock is right here. And without having any of the extra paintwork to worry about, that means marginal bumps and scrapes aren't going to slow you down and aren't going to cause you those headaches in terms of need to refurbish. So what we have is a very ergonomic, very easy to keep clean, very practical front. Nice large front grille, nice large 3-point star, because come on, you're going to want your customers to know you're driving a Mercedes. And then as we sweep further through the back, one of the nice things that has happened with the Vito as the generations have progressed is it's a lot more ergonomic, a lot rounder, a lot softer through the years, and therefore is a lot more pleasant to look at. You might not think that makes a lot of difference in a commercial vehicle, but as you can see, this is obviously going to have an impact on your ergonomic performance and of course your aerodynamics, meaning that fuel efficiency is going to be better. That's obviously very important in an electric vehicle, but also anything you drive, you're going to want to look nice, aren't you? As we come through to the side, we still manage to keep that fairly discreet styling. Essentially, any commercial vehicle is a box on wheels. The fundamentals of them are that we need to put the maximum amount of things in the back and the maximum amount of load weight that we can put on top of those axles. That's a very difficult design challenge because you don't really just want it to look like a box. And I've always quite liked the way that Mercedes have addressed this. Their vehicles don't just look like boxes, but they still do manage to hold an awful lot of stuff. So as we come through the side, again, it's difficult finding the right emotive terms to describe the side of a panel van, but it looks nice. And I do like the way we have an inset here. Now in the passenger version, obviously, this is where the glass would go. But on the commercial versions, this is a very nice indent for your logo, your signage, or whatever else you want to put there. Coming through to the back, let's take a look. As you'll remember me mentioning earlier, what's most important to Mercedes is that you have the wide, full range of all of the standard Vito options available on the electric platform too. So these doors at the rear are just one of the options. Very convenient if you need to load and unload in slightly limited space, but people who are used to these vans will know and love this function. What that allows you to do is to use a forklift to put a standard Euro pallet straight into the back of your van. And trust me, that can be extremely useful. Look at that. we now have a very impressive load area. Now we're going to get into the numbers a little bit later when we do our interview with our expert. There are so many different options available on this vehicle, and I don't want to take up too much of our time by telling you about all of them. As I say, they're very, very excited to point out that if you like having it on a eVito, you'll be able to get it on the electric one. This one only comes with the one sliding door, but you can of course get them with two. And here we see that the floor has been fitted out with these ratchet strap rails. That's particularly useful if you want to transport things that need tying down. I'm not quite so sure if I've ever felt the need to tie down mulch in the back of my van, but I'm quite impressed that I'd have the option to if I wanted. Other than that, obviously it's very basic, but that is, after all, what the van's supposed to be. You can have it panelled out with wood, depending on what you're going to put in here. It's very, very, very practical. We've got tie downs everywhere, and you can fit more or less anything you want to in the back of this. Not enough space? Don't worry. You can get a large wheelbase version, which holds even more. Let's take a look inside and see how the styling is. Well, okay, full disclosure, I already told you I'm a little bit of a fan of vans. Why do I like them so much? Well, they're built for practicality, and that's a little piece of me. So when you look at the door design down here, you could say, but that is an awful lot of plastic. Well, that's not how I see it. What I see is, but that's an awful lot of easy to clean I'm looking at. And if you have to get in and out of a commercial vehicle on a building site 20 times in a day, trust me, you are going to appreciate it. Storage is absolutely paramount in commercial vehicles because you always have so much that you need to keep track of, delivery dockets, your lunch, and 1,000 other things. So I like the way that we've got some nice features included in this door. A little bit of an inset here just for change or for keys or for anything you don't want to get lost. A decent sized storage pocket down below. And trust me when I tell you this is the most important feature, a big enough well to put a good sized bottle of water, which you are going to want. Coming into the cabin itself, again, you could be a little harsh and say, well, it's a bit basic in here. Honestly, trust me, basic when it comes to commercial vehicles really is where it's at. Basic and comfortable. So, I'm 5'10" in height, or 178 centimeters. I have more than enough headspace. This seat is very comfortable. Again, basic but comfortable. Now, if I have a look at the cabin space overall, the first thing to note is that you want to try and get the driving experience of a van as close to that of a car as you possibly can, because that's about comfort and enjoyment. And if you're going to be driving hundreds of kilometers in one of these, you don't want to feel as if you've been driving 100 kilometers in a van. What I like about this is because of the ride height of the seat itself, the road positioning is very good indeed. I'm really comfortable. I have really great all-round visibilities with these nice, big, well-positioned mirrors on the side and a brilliantly large view over the road. The steering wheel itself, well, again, basic, stripped down. Mercedes are very, very keen to point out one of the concerns that commercial vehicle owners have is, well, I need to make sure that somebody can work on my vehicle whenever I need it, because they do break down, they do have issues that need to be addressed. And that does not look like something that your local garage is necessarily going to be able to take care of. Well, don't worry. Alongside the release of these vehicles, they also have a new 24/7 support service. They really want to make this work. So whatever you have that you need to get answers to, because high-power drivetrains are not simple propositions, they will have the support there to make sure you can deal with it. Let's have a quick word about the seats. Well, they are nice and conservative. Good, solid, rugged fabric that looks very hard-wearing and also very easy to keep clean. You can see in this model, we have the two-seater version, but as with all commercial vehicles, you have a wide range of different choices. I'm a big fan of 3 seats up front because you just never know when you're going to need to pick somebody extra up. But if you want the 2 seats, they are more than comfortable, and they do offer you then this extra storage area in the middle. I have no doubt that there are multiple units that you can have put there as well. But to be honest, in a commercial vehicle, that space is just as much useful for a box of leaflets you're taking around or a large kit bag that you need for your business anyway. Coming slightly further through, we can see that this display is very simple and straightforward to use. We're not wasting any time or money with a massive display here. We just don't need it. Instead, Now let's see, we don't have a key so I can't turn it on yet, but I promise you we will show you that when we go for a drive. We have a very straightforward design here. Nice extra storage area up on top for those delivery dockets that I mentioned earlier. And if your van is anything like mine, this is where you're going to keep about 50 pens, only about 2 of which will have any ink in or work at all when you need them to, but for some reason you'll never go through them and get rid of the ones that don't. So thank you, Mercedes, for coping with my incompetence when it comes to this car. Now let's have a look and see if we can hold anything actually of use in this glove box. Once again, something to feel happy about with commercial vehicles, and you'll be pleased to see that even despite the extensive amount of electrics here, we still have plenty of space for throwing things in there that we will forget about for the next 5 years. Meanwhile, everything in this really great hard plastic, really great because so easy to keep clean, and it's going to look good for years. When the sun hits this, it's not going to fade and look terrible. It will just keep looking nice. And I love the way that this central console is all in, guess what? Matte black. And that means it's not going to look terrible with fingerprints. Nice little storage spaces either side of the main unit, and we still have a stereo aux in and a USB charge point. The Vito is going to come with 3 installed batteries, and those are underneath the chassis of the vehicle. They're going to provide you with 41.4 kilowatt hours, and out of that, you're going to be able to get a range of up to 150 kilometers. I say up to, of course, that does depend on how you drive and how you use the vehicle, but I have been assured that even if you're a little bit keen and enthusiastic with the heating and the speed, you should still be able to get an effective range of at least 100. Well, okay, that's the Vito, that's a smaller vehicle, but they're not magic. How is that going to apply to our friend the Sprinter? Well, it doesn't take a genius of science to understand this is a significantly larger vehicle. Well, you have 2 options here. You can go with the same 3 battery configuration that's available on the Vito. That will only give you a range of up to 115 kilometers on this vehicle. However, you can have a 4th installed again underneath, and that increases the range to match the Vito at 150. Now that really is going to depend on what your personal needs are. The brilliant thing with both of these vehicles is a full charge from empty only takes up to 6 hours. So what that means is if all you have to do is scoot in and around town, you should be able to get pretty much everything done in a Sprinter with that 3 battery configuration. But let's be honest, you can often have challenges that need that little bit more, so I like the added flexibility of being able to increase the range. Look at the size of this thing. It's absolutely unbelievable that you're able to get that kind of range now out of an electric vehicle. Again, Mercedes are really keen to stress they don't want their customers to need to think about anything connected with electricity beyond the fact that it will be producing 0 emissions and will make no difference to the options that you want to be able to put onto your commercial vehicle. Don't forget, it's not only the 0 emissions that are nice to have. If you factor in the saving on the fuel and the usage of this vehicle, what they're very keen to point out is that there should be no distinction in price or spend for a business to go electric. And that for me is a very exciting fact. I think it's about time we took this van out and saw just what it can deliver. What do you think, Michelle?
You can.
Okay, so the first thing we find when we turn it on is we obviously get all of the information we need about the potential performance of the battery. It will always start by default in economy mode to maximize the amount of efficiency that you can get from the battery. And it's telling me within the digital display down here that I have a 97% full battery, and that should deliver in standard economy a range of about 130 kilometers. Now that's based on its predictive usage. There are 3 different modes that we can switch it between. There's Economy, there's Economy Plus. That's going to give me the most efficient ride that I can get. That changes it up to 137 kilometer range. And there is also Comfort, and that is the most fun you can have while driving it. And that tells me that I can get a range of about 123. Now that's before we start doing anything particularly demanding with the car, but it's nice to know that the range between most efficient and most fun isn't actually so drastically difficult, which means that if you only know how many miles you'll be driving around town in a van, you really can enjoy the driving experience to its fullest. And that's not all. On the steering wheel, we have what look remarkably like Tiptronic gear shifters. Obviously, they don't do that, but what they do is they change the way in which the vehicle recuperates energy from its driving. Now, if you used electric vehicles before and you're used to them, what that mainly feels like is regenerative braking, so that the car is a little bit more efficient at reabsorbing energy that you're using within the drive. That does make it handle a lot less like a traditional car, and for that reason you can switch up those modes to make it handle a lot more as you might expect. If you're used to this car, I don't know why you would ever leave the most efficient use of driving it, but I absolutely understand that if you want to lend this to somebody who's not used to driving an electric vehicle, it's so much simpler just to make it perform as much like the standard driving experience as they're used to. I'm a big fan of efficiency personally, so I'm going to be wanting to see what's the maximum I can achieve from the range of the vehicle. Now, obviously being a fully electric car, it's not only the way that the engine is performing that we want to concern ourselves with, it's also the additional things that we're doing with the car while we're driving. And that's best explained by thinking about it like this. I'm going to put the car in drive, and off we go. Now, what you're used to thinking if you're used to driving a standard van is that it doesn't really matter what you do with it while you're out and driving, because it's all being regenerated through the alternator. It takes a little bit of a mental shift in an electric vehicle to register that because everything you're doing is electric, therefore everything you're doing will have an impact on the energy consumption of the vehicle. Now, in the case of this van here, as you can probably see from my face, it's a little bit warm where we're filming today. So I don't know about you, I'd quite like to have some cooling. What do you think?
I already switched it on.
Some more cooling, I should say, Michelle.
Okay,
now,
I agree.
This is going to make the sound a little bad, so I will switch it off as soon as we've used it. But I really want to see what real-world impact this has on our fuel efficiency as we go. So let's make it really cold and really put those fans up. Oh, paradise. Yes, I know it's very loud. We're not going to do it for long. But I can tell you, you can still hear me talking though, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. And I've switched it off again. And I can tell you that the effect that that had on our potential range in this car was around about 10 kilometers overall. So we had an experience drop of less than 10% on this vehicle. And I think that's actually really good, because I don't know about you, but when I drive around on a hot day like today, I really quite like a little bit of cooling. Now, we had a chat to our expert already, and what he told us is that if you have to look at energy consumption, heating is always taking up a little bit more than cooling. But Mercedes are launching these vehicles with an app that you can use on your phone. You'll already be more than a little bit familiar with that idea if you own an electric vehicle or you've used one already. But that allows some real advantages with commercial vehicles, not least of which is, I know that it takes me 6 hours to take this vehicle from completely empty to full. After that, I don't need any power for recharging. So if I know I want to use this vehicle in the middle of winter and it is freezing cold, then I can then instruct the vehicle to preheat for me off the charging source. That means I come to work to experience a warm vehicle, preheated just for me, and still a 100% charged vehicle. What do I do then? Well, it's a much more efficient way of staying warm in a car to use the electric seats that come with these electric vehicles than it is to use the air. If you think about your hairdryer at home, it's not very power efficient. So that's the best way to get the best use out of the battery. Make it nice and warm before you want to use it, and then stay nice and warm using the electric seats. Okay, so because we're in the test ground, which is the only place that we're both allowed to be inside this vehicle, at the same time at any rate, you may have noticed we're driving around in big circles. But that doesn't mean that we can't find out exactly what kind of speed this can deliver. And I, for one, can't wait to find out. You'll be more than a bit familiar with the fact that electric vehicles don't make a huge amount of noise. What you may also be familiar with is they do produce a good amount of acceleration. Now, obviously here today we have a little limited space in order to show you that. But I can tell you that for a commercial van, and don't forget, we do actually have a payload in the back. It might not be that much, but it certainly is enough to represent real world usage. And if I put my foot down, you can see that I have plenty enough acceleration available to me to pull away from the lights and stay safe. And really, that's all I want. As much fun as it's been to drive around the parking lot here at the test site, I think we really need some open road experience. So we've gotten a couple of the guys from Mercedes to agree to take us out into the wilds of Hamburg and have a look and see what it's like to take this out around town. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about the driving modes, and by default, although we start in economy, there is the more efficient mode, economy plus, if we have a little bit of range anxiety, which is always something of a concern with an electric vehicle if you find yourself needing to go somewhere that you hadn't planned to go. So the thinking there is, if you either want to know that you're driving at your absolute most efficient, or you just suddenly find that you have to go a little bit further, there is essentially a way of getting a reserve tank situation out of your battery. And that's nice just for feeling reassurance. But to be honest, with a range of 125 kilometers being promised to me by a battery that's 95% full, I'm seeing no reason why I would want to switch out of comfort right now. One of the nicest things about driving an electric vehicle around town is just how good it makes you feel about driving, really. You'll notice as you drive around cities the effect that pollution has not only on the living inhabitants of the city, but also on the city itself. Those soot marks on the buildings, just the wear and tear of the place in general, and it just doesn't feel right driving through crowds of people while you're pushing pollutants into everybody's lungs. So it's really a genuine pleasure to be able to come out in and around town in a car that's fully electric and therefore is not having any negative impact on anyone. Well, that's all great in principle, but you still need to be able to do your day's work with the vehicle that you're out with. I think an effective range, let's be honest, I'm going to say 100 kilometers. I know we can get up to 150, but that is still an up to figure. And on a day like today, I'm going to want my air conditioning, I am going to want to listen to my radio, and I am going to want to drive in comfort. So I think for most people's requirements, knowing that they can do all of those things without getting stressed and still get a 100-mile range means that they have the capacity to actually enjoy the experience of driving an electric vehicle. The reduced noise is lovely. So you may have picked up on the soundtrack just then, you do still get a fair bit of road noise. You have to remember it is a commercial vehicle, and although the sound insulation is good, the streets in Hamburg are often cobbled, and there's not really a lot you can do about that. But on a standard tarmac surface, like the one we're driving on right now, it's really very quiet indeed. I mentioned earlier on that we have different driving modes that we can select while we're going, and those I can access by using these paddles directly on the steering wheel. Let's just play with those a little bit and see what we can do. Okay, so we have coming up D, D+, and D++ on the display, and that's the level of recuperation that I'm getting into the system while I'm driving. So with D-, I'm guessing, and I'm going to refer to my expert here, that is the highest level of recuperation that I can have. Yes, I remembered some information. So you can't get a sense of this visually so much, but I'm very pleased to tell you that the lag that you get as the vehicle absorbs the energy from braking is actually very minimal. I've always been a huge fan of braking recuperation because it saves so much wasted energy on brake usage, and the more you get used to the vehicle, the more it thanks you for driving it that way too. It's almost a fun game to see how far you can get around town without needing to use your brakes at all. It's nice, you come to the traffic lights, you cruise to a stop, and you are not using any energy at all. I can hear next door the van to me burning through its diesel, and I have to tell you, I feel a little bit smug that I'm not. Being sat at the traffic lights allows us to see what we can get away with in terms of straight line speed here. It's more than enough for around town. So I'm not going to any effort at all to push this car any harder than it wants to be pushed. And I left the van that was standing next to me in my rear view mirror as it burnt through its diesel. So I'm more than happy with my ability. There we go. And we nicely come to a stop again at the next traffic lights. It's kind of a bit of fun that we're having because of the restrictions of being able to use this vehicle out and around town. Michelle, our cameraman, is in the vehicle in front of me, and he's having more than a little bit of fun with the traffic lights right now, as are we. But it's a lovely city to drive through, and it really is a more than pleasant driving experience. One thing you really do have the opportunity to get the experience of once you take the van out into a real world situation is how good the all-around visibility is. And as you'd expect from eVito, it's a very well-known model. Years and years of experience have been put into making sure that you have the most car-like driving experience of this van that is possible to have. The visibility is excellent. The rear view mirrors on this vehicle are really good, and you might think, well, why would you want to bother mentioning rear view mirrors? If you're not used to driving a van, it comes as a real shock to get rid of having your rear view mirror here, I can tell you, and you learn to use your side mirrors in a very different way. Side mirrors in a car are often a little bit of an afterthought. In the van, they are how you do everything. So having the right position and the right mirror is absolutely critical, and it never ceases to amaze me quite how many vans still have mirrors that are too small or poorly placed. It makes a huge difference to your driving experience. And in this car, they really are absolutely fantastic. We're driving right through the middle of Hamburg right now. There are lots and lots of pedestrians walking in the middle of the road and all over the place. And I feel completely confident that I know exactly where everybody is in relation to this van. And that's exactly as it should be.
Well, we do a lot of clips at Autogefühl of big SUVs, and sometimes those feel enormous, but I have to tell you, standing in front of the Sprinter, you're aware of just quite how much visual trickery there is involved in making such a large load space look relatively small from a distance. I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but I feel tiny compared to this. Well, we talked a lot earlier about how the new modern styling of these vans makes them look a lot more pleasing to the eye, and it's nice to see so much of that characteristic from the Vito carried through onto the Sprinter. Again, easy to keep clean, nice, rugged, durable, plastic front. Very nice the way that they've molded the color here into these wraparound headlights. It makes it look very modern and not too aggressively van-like. Sweeping through into this enormous side, well, you don't need me to tell you the biggest challenge with designing a vehicle like this is how can we try and make it look just a little bit smaller on the road? Well, these black strips are not only nice from a styling point of view, but they're also incredibly practical. Again, as with the bumper, anything that hits these might leave a scratch, but it's not going to leave you with a nasty repair bill. And that's really a useful thing when you're taking your commercial vehicles places you really wouldn't want to take your personal one. You don't really get a sense of the full scale of this beast until you have a look inside. Now, this is a zero production unit, and what that means is it has not been finished. This is not sale ready. So we're showing you a little bit of a cheeky behind the scenes look when it comes to how this thing is finished. But it wouldn't be Autogefühl if we didn't give you a glimpse, would it? Let's take a look. Ha! And Michel had money on thinking he could lock me inside here. So, as with our friend, the Vito, we can fold these doors right the way back. Oh, sorry, Michel. And that is going to allow us, again, to use a pallet truck to get everything that we need in here. Now, there are literally hundreds of different options that you can have with these vehicles. And one of the things that's most common to do with the Sprinter is have it custom fitted inside to make it a mobile workshop. And being able to see one completely naked like this really does give you a scope of how much potential there is to do that. There are so many mounting points here, and once you have the vehicle fully paneled out, you can pretty much do anything you want with it. Being a zero model production, the interior is not finished on this vehicle, but it still does give us a sense of scale. The reason we're showing you inside here anyway is just so you can get a sense of how cavernous it is. And again, being a Mercedes van, there are so many different ways you can get the interior finished, so it matches exactly whatever your needs might be.
So we've had the opportunity to give the Vito a try. Well, it'd be more than a little bit rude if we came here and we didn't try out the Sprinter. So this is a zero production model. That would be the handbrake, which means that there are some details that haven't been finalized, but it's more than sufficiently ready to give us a good feeling of the drive. Well, the first thing right off from the start that you notice when you drive this is quite how deceptively light it feels. Now, okay, we don't have a full load in the back, and that significantly changes the way that any van handles. But even from a static shot of looking outside, you will have noticed just how much bigger this vehicle is than the Vito, which is why for me personally it's so impressive that you can achieve the same range with only 33% more battery or one extra battery being fitted underneath. I would want that personally. I think the optimal range of 150 kilometers sounds right to me. So even though we could save a bit of weight on just having the 3, I think I'm going to go with the 4 for peace of mind. Well, traditionally larger vans are much less fun to drive, and this is because they have a longer wheelbase and they're bigger in general. They notice a lot more in terms of the wind and the other road situations that you encounter as you're driving. But I'm very happy to say that I'm really not finding that at all with the handling of this van. Okay, clearly it's going to feel a little bit bigger by way of experience, but it's still very pleasantly nimble. And the acceleration isn't bad either, I have to tell you. So what do I think? Well, I can't wait to try the finished version.
So we've been joined by Marcus Rice, who is the head of product management for the electric vehicle division. No small job, and he has agreed to tell us a few things about quite what makes these cars so special. So Marcus, firstly, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. We're here with the new all-electric Sprinter and the Vito. They look very similar to me to the Sprinter and the Vito. They have the same payload capacity, they have the same ability to hold the amount of load in the back, but they also have batteries. So how is this possible?
So on the Vito we have increased the gross vehicle weight to get the payload, and also on the Sprinter we have different options on battery capacities so that our customer can choose if we want to have range or payload. So it's his decision. So everything's fine for him, hopefully.
Okay, so that explains the weight, but what I'm not understanding is the batteries have to go somewhere, and usually if you look to a standard electric car, that means there's no boot space. But we've seen back there. So where are the batteries?
The batteries are mounted on the floor because we want our customers to be able to use the vehicle like every other Vito or Sprinter. So mounting on the floor, it's a secure place, and he can use the load compartment like in every other van.
All right, so that explains half of the challenge. The batteries are under the car, but they still look the same size. So how are we doing that? Do we have an increased ride height or less ground clearance?
We have only increased the height of the vehicle a little bit with a different suspension, but there's enough space on the floor of the vehicle so we can use the space between the axles. There's enough space, plenty space, and there we mounted the batteries.
Yeah, it's kind of still seems like cheating to me, I don't know. Well, now I have to tell you, the most common complaint that you have with electric vehicles is always range anxiety. So when I read in the literature that these vehicles can have a range of up to's the magic phrase, 150 kilometers, come on, what's the realistic range for these vehicles?
The realistic range in bad weather conditions, it's more or less 100 kilometers, but we have also good drivers in our company who get 150, 160 kilometers out of this vehicle.
That sounds like a challenge to me. So, talking of challenges, it clearly wasn't easy managing to make this platform work as an electric platform without compromising at all in terms of the customer's use of the product. So what was the biggest challenge for you about that?
The biggest challenge for us was to enable the customer to get always the maximum range out of the vehicle. That was our biggest challenge, and I think we have some good ideas and some good solutions to enable him.
Well, we've had a good chance to take them around for a drive, and I can tell you, you absolutely don't notice any compromises there at all. Now, I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball. I hope that's okay. We were hoping this is technology. In the case of the Vito, you can order one today. The Sprinter is going to be available to purchase from next year. But fuel cell vehicles, they're coming as well. Why? What is the point? What do we get from that technology?
So we still have some customers with a demand for a longer range. So battery technology is there limited at the moment. So there are customers who need a lot of more range, and therefore fuel cell technology is one opportunity.
Great. So I think there's your solution. If you're looking at these and thinking, I'd love that, but I have to have more than 150 kilometer range, talk to Mercedes about the fuel cell, and we will, of course, bring you that information as soon as it's available to us. Well, Marcus, I have to ask you, there's a lot to like about these. What's your favorite feature of these vans?
The favorite feature, I think it's a recuperation. You can drive this vehicle only with the pedal, with one pedal, and acceleration, deceleration, one pedal, it's enough. You don't have to brake anymore.
I feel we should stress to viewers, you probably should use the brake if you're sensing that it's an important feature. I quite like it still. Marcus, thank you so much for taking the time to show us these vehicles. I think they're extraordinary, and I hope that they're as successful for you as they should be. Guys, if you have any questions that you would like us to put to Marcus, then please don't forget to pop them into the comments below. We always do read them, and we always do pass on your feedback. There's so much to take in with these new cars. I think the most important thing that I would want to express is just how little, as a customer using these products, that you notice any difference in your experience from all of the other drivetrains that we've recognized. Was that an important part of the design brief?
Sure. For us, the philosophy is it's just another powertrain. So the vehicle should feel like a real Mercedes-Benz van. It should drive like a Mercedes-Benz van, and also for our customers, it's commercial customers, they should use it as a Mercedes-Benz van.
Well, you can't really say fairer than that, can you? Marcus, thank you so much for taking time to speak to us, and we look forward to seeing more of your cars on the road soon. Regular viewers will know that I have more than a little bit of a soft spot for vans, and the reason for that is I'm a huge fan of practicality, and there are really very few places in the world of vehicles that you can go to where something is more designed for the specific use that it has than vans. Really, it's a box on wheels. It's practical. It needs to be efficient. It needs to be easy to clean. It needs to be easy to run and maintain. And for that reason, until relatively recently, an electric van wasn't really the best option. Why? Well, it just didn't produce the range that you needed. It wasn't efficient as you needed, and it involved so many compromises in terms of its use as a consumer that it just didn't make you want to do it. Well, I'm happy to tell you that that is changing. And nowhere is that better demonstrated than in these vehicles. We've spent a fair bit of time driving around Hamburg today in the Vito, and I can tell you that if somebody blindfolded you, put it in there and played a noise of an engine sound to you, you would have no way of knowing that you weren't driving a regular drivetrain in a van. Not only is the standard experience of the Vito an extremely pleasant one, but the electric drivetrain does not change that one bit at all. So here you have the best of both worlds. And when Mercedes promise you, obviously we'll have to wait and see if they're as good as their word, that when you take into account the cost of ownership over the lifetime of this vehicle, it will be no more expensive than a regularly powered vehicle, there are becoming less and less reasons not to go fully electric. Now, okay, you're still going to be slightly limited by that 150 kilometer range, but the fuel cell hopefully will be addressing that later on next year. In the meantime, for the vast majority of consumers and for the vast majority of companies, 150 kilometers makes this a very viable prospect for a business. And in terms of its enjoyability to use, well, there are two answers to that. First of all, if you like driving this van as it regularly comes, you're going to like this just as much. But this comes with something that doesn't, and that's a whole lot of feeling good while you're driving it around town. And I, for one, can't wait to see that applied to a whole lot more vehicles.